More news tonight in the ongoing drama between the president, his former lawyer Michael Cohen, and the subject of pardons. Both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times report that federal prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan have now requested emails that appear to show, and buckle up for this one, a so-called back channel of communication between Cohen and Trump's legal team about a possible pardon. The Times reports that last year, Cohen was in contact with an attorney named, this is a new name for this story, Robert Costello, who emailed him after reaching out to, an old name in this story, Rudy Giuliani. According to the Times, Cohen received an email from Costello, April 2018, that ended with the message, quote, "Sleep well tonight. You have friends in high places." In another email, Costello reportedly wrote to Cohen, quote, "Rudy was thrilled and said this could not be a better situation for the president or you. Mr. Giuliani," he added, "said thank you for opening this back channel of communication." Costello doesn't dispute the emails, but says they have been taken out of context. In a statement, he said the "friends in high places" line was a tongue-in-cheek reference to a Garth Brooks song. Well, it better be tongue-in-cheek. The song, the whole point of the song is, "I've got friends in low places." Nothing about high places. Giuliani says the emails were not about a pardon. Costello has agreed to provide the emails to prosecutors who, the Times says, cited an investigation into, quote, "possible violations of federal criminal law" with their request. Still with us, Josh Kirstein, Maya Wiley, and Frank Figluzzi. Maya, just beyond what they've done to Garth Brooks, what is going on here?
So, look, Brian. Well, first of all, obviously those who believe that Michael Cohen is a liar and is not to be trusted will use this to say, see, he was angling for himself, and whatever this turnaround is doesn't really mean that much. But if you follow the email trail, what's astounding about them is not only does it paint this picture now, and in fairness to Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow, there does seem to be corroboration of the fact that they said no, not at this time. Okay. But then Rudy Giuliani says, but it's the president's prerogative, who knows what comes later. And that in and of itself does not set up, the possibility of a dangling pardon. But then there's this Robert Costello email in June. Now, the relationship is already starting to fall apart. Remember, I think it was July that Michael Cohen says, I'm done with these people, and he changes his legal team completely. But Robert Costello sends him this cryptic email that says, hey, I'm going to talk to my friend who can talk to his client. You hung up abruptly on me. This is a good moment. The sort of suggestion of, I'm going to talk to my friend Rudy, who's going to talk to his friend Donald Trump. Are you sure you don't want me to pass anything on? And that in and of itself is not a smoking gun, but it is smoke. Okay. And I read that in the context of all these other emails to say, if I'm an investigator, I'm really going to do a lot of investigating to see what more is there. And I think that's what we're hearing from the news stories.
Hey, Frank, I'm sitting home listening to all this, or perhaps even sitting in this chair listening to all this, wondering how we should think about all these talks about pardons, all these mentions of pardons. It seems to be in the background of so many of the tableaus. Talk about that and how it might blow back on Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, so let's level set for a moment here and set aside criminal allegations of obstruction, witness tampering that are related to dangling pardons. Let's talk about ethics and integrity just for a second. This whole notion of the president's criminal defense attorneys, not White House counsel, not ethics and policy lawyers, but his defense team, even entertaining discussion of a pardon, entering into so-called back channel communications, wholly inappropriate and and puts us much more squarely in the obstruction category than, say, White House counsel explaining the facts of life of how a pardon works to somebody. So this smells very badly. Now let's move on to what that means about Rudy and perhaps other lawyers. This gets very complicated because we're entering a world of executive privilege and discussions and who said what to whom, privileged communications. But here's the bottom line. Don't get caught up in who approached who first so much as what the response was and what those criminal defense attorneys, for example, Rudy Giuliani, responded to and entertained and implied when they discussed a pardon. That's a problem, and I think it does lead to the possibility that Rudy himself could find himself a fact witness being interviewed by FBI agents or prosecutors. It's a continued mess, and it causes me to say, for all those who say Mueller is taking way too long to finish up, my response to that is when Trump's team stops committing crimes and the evidence stops coming out, maybe Mueller can wrap up.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.